Okay, everyone, another Monday, another issue, and today we are going to talk about negative online reviews and how do you respond to them. This is an example that is coming from the Thriving Urology Practice Facebook group where we are live streaming right now, as well as on one of my YouTube channels. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments below. All right. I have spoken about negative online reviews, it seems like forever. It is actually a very straightforward, easy, formulaic way that I respond to these reviews. And once you do it a few times, it's really straightforward, but not everyone gets it. It is really, really straightforward. So anyway, you're going to get negative reviews no matter what. If you're a business, if you're a medical practice, you are going to get negative reviews because people who are unhappy are more likely to be vocal. And these reviews come in all forms. In the past, it used to be a phone call. It could be an email message. It could be a letter. However, those are considered, in the old days, the phone calls, the letters, the emails, those are more off-stage reviewers, meaning they're not the ones who really want people to hear about their complaints. Now, you have on-stage reviewers. They take the world as the stage, and you have to respond accordingly. This particular negative review came from someone who asked for advice regarding what to do. And it reads something like this. Office is threatening to charge me $100 due to rescheduling my visit. My son is in the hospital with COVID for an emergency, and they won't reschedule. I have the records to prove it, but office is still trying to charge our family. It's safe to say that we'll never return the poorest customer service or even empathy. Avoid, avoid, avoid. All right, so this is not uncommon. You're going to get people who are unhappy, and in this situation, it seems like the office has a policy of charging for no-shows. If you don't call the office, if you don't show up at all, no contact, and it's in a financial policy that the patient agreed to prior to being seen the first time that he or she visits, they agree to it. They typically sign on a document, initial on a document saying that they agree to it. And it seems like the patient did not call to cancel his appointment. So now it seems like he wants to follow up. He wants to be seen again in the office saying that, hey, you know what? Because you no show, no call in the past, we are now going to charge you $100 per their policy. It could be a procedure or something like that. Office appointment, I don't know which one. It doesn't really matter. So that is seems to be the situation. It's always unhappy patient. Either they're waiting too long, the office is unorganized, or it's financial. It's typically one of those three things. If you read online reviews of medical practices, it's typically one of those things that patients are unhappy about. So try to mitigate those if you can, but sometimes you do, unfortunately, have patients who are unreasonable and they leave negative reviews. All right, so this appears to be the issue is that he no-showed to an appointment and he was charged, and now he wants to follow up, and apparently there's some extenuating circumstances, and the medical practice is apparently charging the patient. All right, so let's go on and check out the response from the owner of the practice. Dear patient, thanks for your feedback as we regularly review communication from staff members regarding our policies. We are sorry that in this case, we were unable to meet your expectations as we did enjoy having you as a patient. We wish you the best in your medical care. So note this sentence right here. We did enjoy having you as a patient. We'll come back to talk about that some more. Okay, so negative online reviews. It doesn't have to, responding to them does not have to be mentally taxing. You don't have to spend a lot of mental energy. I get it. You started a practice, or you built this practice, or you are part of a practice. You do everything you can. You try to educate the staff and set up policies and workflows to make sure that everything goes smoothly. But unfortunately, sometimes don't go perfectly as planned. And so patients end up unhappy. I have those too. You can certainly find negative reviews on my website. It's going to be there. But the problem with medicine is that we have something called HIPAA, which means you can't openly respond and share all the details regarding why the patient was rescheduled or what exactly happened. Heck, you can't even acknowledge that this reviewer was an actual patient. So how do you respond to these negative reviews? The hardest thing to do is to respond empathetically, which is the first thing that you need to do after you acknowledge the patient. Empathetic response. It is the most difficult thing to do. Empathy meaning you are standing in the shoes of your patient and verbalizing and writing down what he or she will say. That is the hardest thing to do because you don't want to admit that something did go wrong, or you don't want to see that patient's perspective is valid. It is the hardest thing to do, but it is the first thing that you have to do after you acknowledge the patient. And then you want to switch channels. Do not keep playing in the pig pen with pigs because you end up smelling like you know what, and you look dirty and you smell dirty. Let's just leave it at that. So you want to switch channels. You want to say, hey, call us or do something else other than continuing to have the discussion in that online forum, because you're not going to win, even though as much as you like to address the details, the backstory, if you will. And I also belong to a dental review Facebook group. And every time I see somebody, hey, what would you do? Or here, I got a negative review. My thinking, the first thing I think of when they start talking about the backstory is that nobody gives a shit about the backstory. Nobody cares about the backstory. And the more you go into the backstory, the greater the chance that invariably you will violate HIPAA. That's just the bottom line. If you start talking about backstory, you are going to violate HIPAA. You are going to release protected health information. So do not even, I don't care about the backstory. As a patient, as somebody who's reading the review, I don't care about the backstory. I don't care about the medical practices issues or non-issue or patient's actual issues or how the patient may be wrong. I don't care about that. I care about how you as a practice respond to the patient. And that is what is more important than anything else. Talking about the backstory means you are going to violate HIPAA. So don't even talk about it. Now, keep in mind, this is someone who posted a review on the internet. They are an on-stage hater of your practice. So they are addressing you on the world stage. It is your responsibility to respond on the world stage. So when this person posted and asked for requested responses or suggestions on what to do on the Thriving Urology Practice Facebook group, a lot of people responded. And I'm going to talk about a couple of responses. And these are the members, the folks who are in the Thriving Urology Practice Facebook group who read the review and the requests for suggestions. And here are some of the responses. So Melissa said, if I was someone reading this review, I'd be thinking, wow, what a terrible office. And then reading your response, I'll be thinking, and the doctor doesn't care that his office is charging this poor guy at this time of personal and financial hardship. I think the reply sounds shallow. Now, this is from the perspective of someone who's reading the response by the practice. And let's see. Somebody else said, I agree with you regarding what Melissa wrote. So when you as a medical practice, when you respond to these reviews, you have to think in terms of the person who is going to be reading the reviewer and your response. So the reviewer and your response, and you respond that way. Yes, you want to address the person who wrote the review, but I think your response is going to be more for the person who's going to be reading your review and how they are going to feel. So empathetic, after you acknowledge the patient, empathetic response, and then switch channels, and then you can do whatever else that you want to add in there. And I would recommend maybe considering offering a way for the patient to reach you, and then resolving that issue if you are the physician responding to the review, or if you have someone who deals with these negative reviews, maybe your PR department, marketing department, whoever responds to these reviews, have a way for this complainant to reach you and consider trying to figure out how to resolve this issue. It doesn't mean that they're going to call. It doesn't mean that you are going to be able to resolve the issue, but at least you should try. So now, what would I do? First of all, I would not even say that we did enjoy having you as a patient. I would not say that we did enjoy you have a patient, because you now acknowledge that this person was a patient of your practice, and that is not something you want to do. It's a HIPAA violation, believe it or not. You don't even want to acknowledge that this was a patient in your practice. In general, you should not. How's that? All right. So how would I respond to this negative review if this was left on my website, on my Google review page? I would say, Steve, Peter, Ron, Melanie, Emily, whoever it is, I would address that person by name. And for this particular negative review, I would say, this is the hardest part. Keep in mind. I would say, it is unconscionable to have an office so seemingly uncaring about your emergency situation, which caused you to miss your appointment. You are probably like, what? There's no way I can write that. Well, that is an empathetic response. That is the response. That is how the patient feels. If you were to stand in his shoes or her shoes, how he or she feels after writing that negative review. You are simply verbalizing that. It is the hardest thing to do, and it is the first thing that you need to do after acknowledging the patient's name. Empathetic response. Stand in their shoes and write what that feels like. You are showing the world that you understand, you hear the patient, their frustration, and you understand the situation. That is the first thing that you have to do. Then consider adding anything else that you want to add. I would say, I appreciate your feedback. And I would say, would it be an impossibility for you to contact me at my office number, 480-507-9600, so I can personally look into resolving any misunderstanding? I look forward to hearing from you, and I would sign my name. So I couch the question in terms of a negative. Would it be an impossibility? It's something that I learned from Chris Voss's book. And those of you who are in the group know that we did a book club regarding Chris Voss's book. But I like to ask a negative instead of asking for yeses. So would it be an impossibility for you to contact me at this number so I can personally look into resolving any misunderstanding? And if and when they call, you definitely want to speak with the patient. And I have had a patient call me back recently after I received a negative review, and this person would just, she was just crazy. She was just, anyway, there's some patients that you just cannot salvage. When they're crazy, you just can't do anything about that. But when they do call and you offer to resolve any issues, you should definitely look into it and address any issues with that person, personally look into it. I have even gone as far as looking into the problem and addressing it in the review. This was a patient who was someone who was looking for an appointment, never seen, no physician-patient relationship. So I was able to frankly discuss any misunderstanding in the online review, and I never respond more than twice. So that is the goal. Once like this response here, look into it. And if I can, I will respond the second time. And that's the last time that I will respond on that online review. You don't want to play in the pig pen because you look like a pig and you smell like a pig. So you don't want to get into that type of discussion. So again, address the patient by name, empathetic response, the most difficult thing to do, and then respond in a way that does not imply that this was a patient in your practice. Not, hey, look forward to seeing you again. Hey, we're sorry. We will miss you as a patient. None of that. Do not even acknowledge that they are an actual patient. There are ways to respond empathetically without acknowledging that they're a patient. For instance, what I just did. It is unconscionable to have an office so seemingly uncaring about your emergency situation, which caused you to miss your appointment. Did I acknowledge that this was a patient in the practice? Heck no. Did I say anything about the patient's medical condition in this response? Heck no. Was I completely HIPAA compliant? Hell yeah. So, easy ways to do it. Empathetic response without acknowledging that they're a patient. Address the patient by name, switch channels, and respond to every single positive and negative review, because the world is your stage, the world is their stage, and everybody, including your future potential patients, are reading your reviews before they come to see you. It doesn't matter if you're a medical practice, it doesn't matter what business you're in, people are reading your reviews. As always, any comments or questions, leave them below. I'm always fired up with these negative reviews because it is such an easy way. It is very easy to respond to them without any significant mental energy, and you definitely do not want to violate HIPAA. All right, as usual, comments, questions, leave them below. Take care. Bye-bye.